Hello, welcome back to Taming Toxic Plants. Today I want to tell you about a really unique situation with lichens that are known to cause problems in sheep and elk. So lichens are non-vascular organisms with a symbiotic relationship between a fungus and an algae, and we call them cyanobacteria. They're also called bryophytes. Here you can see two examples of lichens that I've noted in my area of Wyoming. Now, in the state of Wyoming, there's at least 600 native lichen taxa in the state. Not all of these are known to be toxic, but more than 1,000 substances in lichens have been identified. Now, these are known to cause problems in domestic sheep and then elk. There's no evidence in horses or cattle. However, I would suspect that there would be problems if those animals ate enough of lichen. Now, here's just two more examples to give you a visual impression of lichens you might see on the landscape. Again, these are on the surface of rocks or the soil, and they come in many different forms and colors, as you can see here. The glove in this picture just gives you a sense of scale and also shows the relative abundance of the lichens in this particular example. Now, the toxin in lichens that has been implicated is called usnic acid. Usnic acid is a known secondary compound that protects the lichen against herbivores, and so it's pretty clear that it has that function. Now, in terms of the lichen problem, this is really a range condition problem in the relative availability with other forages. So you can see this picture on the right. Here we had some issues with sheep that I will try to highlight in another episode, but I just want to note the relative abundance of lichen. It is by far the most abundant living material on the ground. Now, when it comes to dose, um, just lichen itself, elk only have to consume 5 to 16 milligrams of lichen for each kilogram of body weight for problems to manifest. Now, in sheep, they've dialed that down even further to the toxin, usnic acid, and sheep need to consume anywhere from 500 to 650 milligrams of usnic acid per kilogram of body weight over a 7-day period. Now, in terms of clinical signs of lichen toxicity in sheep, this is going to include lethargic behavior, anorexia, and abdominal discomfort. In elk, it's going to include what we call paresis. This is essentially a partial paralysis and muscular weakness due to nerve damage and or disease, and it can cause death. These animals also become recumbent, unable to stand. Their urine become orange or red, and ultimately these animals can die. So we looked at some sheep flock diets in Wyoming. This included in Hot Springs County and then in the Southern Bridger-Teton National Forest. And this is a paper we published, and I just want to point out we found at least 6 different genera of lichens in those sheep diets, including one in this Xanthoparmelia genus, or a rock shield lichen, and that has been shown to be problematic, as I'll point out here in just a moment. But it's important to note that in these sheep diets, at a single point in time, they could have anywhere from 3 to 4 different lichens in their diet. So this just shows the readiness or willingness of sheep to eat lichens. Now, in Wyoming, there's a really interesting case that I want to highlight in elk. So back in February of 2004, 400 to 500 free-roaming elk were found to be affected in the Red Rim Wildlife Habitat Management Area. Now, in the map on the right, you can see this is southwest of Rawlins, Wyoming, and south of Interstate 80, and there's 2 units highlighted here in these green polygons. Now, elk were found to be in sternal recumbency. They were alert and responsive, but they were unable to physically rise. Over a matter of days, their condition progressed to lateral recumbency, so being laid on their side, dehydration, reduced alertness, and ultimately death. Now, in the necropsy examination, there were degenerative lesions noted, particularly paleness and streaking, white streaking in the muscles. And ultimately, these elk had to be euthanized or they died on their own. Now, 4 of the elk that were still alive were transported to the Wyoming State Veterinary Lab and given a whole suite of treatment: IV fluids, vitamins A, B, D, and E, and selenium, calcium gluconate, dextrose, phosphorus, magnesium, and potassium supplements, anti-inflammatory and steroidal drugs. And they also put these animals in slings to get them upright to try to stimulate ambulatory movement. Importantly, none of these elk responded to treatment, and all either died or were euthanized. Now, in the area, they found this Xanthoparmelia chlorocroa lichen, and it was both in the area but also in the rumen contents of these elk. They then fed that to 3 captive elk that were healthy, and they had intake rates anywhere from 1.1 to 3.6 kilograms per day of just lichen. And within 4 days, these healthy elk lost control of their bodily movements and their urine turned to an orange or red color. Within a week to 10 days, they progressed to weakness and recumbency. And it was noted they had this degenerative myopathy or muscle disease, which has been noted in those free roaming animals. So after the elk case study and feeding trial, they also dosed 9 sheep with usnic acid to see if they could elicit the same symptoms. And it was found that they elicited lethargy, anorexia, the abdominal pain, and then some of the same lesions, and then degenerative myopathy. And some of this work is summarized here in this daily paper. And I just show this because you can see some of that streaking, white streaking in the muscles, which is an indicator of lichen toxicity. So a really interesting case, something to be aware of, and it's certainly a range management issue. If we deplete or reduce all of those more desirable forages, and if that coincides with drought conditions. So I hope this was helpful to you. Check out these other resources if you want to learn more. There's my email, and always, if a poisoning occurs, always reach out to a veterinarian or a medical professional.